Thank you, Jeremiah. So aloha kako, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Father Alapaki for joining us and sharing his wisdom and mana'o with us today regarding racism in Hawaii and how the Catholic response or the spiritual response to that is. So myself, I am Eddie Adachi. I am a fourth year environmental science student, and I will be co-hosting this event with Kat. Kat, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Kat. I'm a second year forensic science student here at Chaminade. Yeah, I'm excited to do this today and learn a little bit more and get to know more about racism in Hawaii, how we could fix or help it get better.
Thank you. So before we begin, just a few housekeeping rules. If you could all mute your microphones, and then if you would like, and if you are comfortable, if you would like to share your video with all of us, so that way we can be talking to your wonderful faces and not necessarily your wonderful names. So if you're absolutely comfortable, please share your screens with us. But if not, that is totally fine, and we hope that the conversation will stick either way. So with that, it is my pleasure to announce and introduce our speaker, Father Alapaki Kim. And Father Alapaki, would you like to do your own introduction?
Okay, aloha kako. Um, my name is Alapaki Kim. I'm from Kailua, Oahu originally. I graduated from Kailua High School. And then when I graduated, I went off to Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I graduated from there and I entered into the Paulist Fathers. And while I was there, I had to finish philosophy and theology. So I went to Fordham University in the Bronx and then went after my graduate degree from Catholic University in Washington, DC. I was ordained a deacon in the Archdiocese of San Francisco, and I worked in Chinatown for a year. And then I was ordained a priest in New York City. And my first assignment was campus ministry at West Virginia University in Morgantown, West Virginia. I was there for about 5 years, and then I was sent to downtown Chicago to Old St. Mary's Church, which was in the Loop at the time. Now it's down on South 14th Street and Michigan Avenue. I worked there as an associate pastor, and I also was campus minister at 3 different schools there: Roosevelt, Columbia, and the Art Institute of Chicago. After the 6 years in Chicago, the community gave me on loan to Hawaii, and they sent me to Hawaii, and Bishop Ferrario sent me to Hilo, where I was chaplain at the University of Hawaii at Hilo, but I also did work on Hawaiian rights programs in Hilo. Bishop Di Lorenzo asked if I would take a parish, and so I did. I was 3 years in Pahoa Sacred Hearts. And then after 3 years in 1998, I was assigned to St. Rita Nanakuli, where I've been for 22 years. I'm the longest assigned priest in the diocese. So I guess, I don't know what else to say. I guess that's it.
Wow, that was really amazing. That's a lot. Really cool.
I can't hear you. Yeah, we can't hear you. Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. What do you like? I don't know where you would like to start. Do you just want to start talking about it, about racism in Hawaii and stuff?
Well, I think
Or
Hawaii, the racism isn't, I don't think it's as bad as in other places, but it exists here. And I think Native Hawaiians, when you go back into history, were dealt with very, very badly. They had a loss of their country. they had a loss of their culture, they had a loss of their language, they had a loss of their identity as people. And all those together make up genocide. So acts of genocide were committed against the Native Hawaiian people. The language, the teaching of the language in schools was banned from about 1895 till 1978. And in that time, the amount of people who spoke Hawaiian went from 100% Hawaiians spoke Hawaiian, and most of the people who lived in Hawaii spoke at least some Hawaiian, to less than 1,700 people in 1978. I think after 1978, when they rescinded the anti-Hawaiian language laws, they allowed the language to be taught again. We have less than 30,000 now that speak Hawaiian. But in my opinion, being that it's now an official language of Hawaii, I believe that everyone, not just Hawaiians, everyone should have to study Hawaiian and English in schools, 12 years of school. And I hope the day will come when everyone has to learn Hawaiian in Hawaii. So I don't know what else. There are certain things that I did not say that I think are pretty offensive to Hawaiians. And one of them is McKinley High School, not the school itself, but the name. McKinley High School's name during the monarchy time was Honolulu High School. When it was moved to its present campus, the name was changed. It was after, I believe, annexation, it was changed to McKinley. They have a statue on that campus of President McKinley, and in his hand, he's holding a document that says the Treaty of Annexation. There was never a treaty of annexation. Hawaii was never legally annexed to the United States. So,
alert from MacKeeper Alert Notification Service. MacKeeper Regular Scan.
I don't know why it's doing that. Hold on. Okay, we got it off. So Hawaii was never really annexed. And a few years ago, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, a man who was a graduate of St. Louis got his PhD, and he brought a lawsuit in the World Court in The Hague. He was suing the Kingdom of Hawaii for not protecting its citizens. But that wasn't the real reason why he did it. So when he went there, the World Court said, you can't sue because Hawaii is the United States. He says, aha, I beg to differ. And then he presented the facts. And now the World Court recognizes Hawaii as a belligerently occupied country since 1893 in The Hague. And also, I think since then, since they recognized that, I think the United States has pulled out of the World Court. They brought a case up to the United Nations to say this, and the United States threw a hissy fit. They said that if anyone, first of all, they're interfering in the internal affairs of the United States, and if anyone supports this, they will immediately cut off any aid. So the annexation was illegal. When the Queen surrendered to the United States under protest, international law says that nothing can change in the country except the occupation until the occupation ends. And a good example of that was when the United States invaded Iraq and overthrew Saddam Hussein. Iraq did not become part of the United States. Iraq was still an independent country. And technically, people who purport independence for Hawaii say that Hawaii is still an independent country because everything after the Queen's surrender is illegal. Now, on the other side, the United States side, the Congress has the power to make a state. On March 11th, 1959, Congress voted to make Hawaii a state. And on August 12th, 1959, they had a plebiscite in Hawaii to vote for statehood. A little over 90% of the people who voted for statehood. And at that time, that was actually, up until this year, that was probably the highest participation in voting in Hawaiian history as part of the United States. You know, so you have two sides of it. You have one side saying that yes, Hawaii is a state, and you have the other side saying no, Hawaii is not a state. So, is there anything else? Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Father Alapaki, for the recap of like the history from your last presentation. I just wanted to mention, if I hadn't before, if Kat hadn't mentioned it, if you do have questions throughout this sort of presentation and talk story session, feel free to unmute yourself, or if you'd like, you could put your questions into the chat for Father Alapaki. And so what we want to focus in within this session is racism in today in Hawaii, and how that relates to Native Hawaiians, as well as how can we sort of extrapolate that to other minority groups in other parts of the world, as well as in the United States. So Father Alapaki, I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem.
Hawaii is one of the most diverse and accepting states in the country. However, why is subtle segregation still prevalent and exist within the state? So if you could elaborate more so with Native Hawaiians and maybe how there might be subtle segregation within that community.
It's really funny because in the church, a bunch of years back, we were talking about Hawaiian being the host culture. And there were actually pastors who came out and say, we have no Hawaiians in our parish, so we don't have to reflect anything of the Native Hawaiian culture. These are Catholic priests that are saying that. But I would say that just about every single parish in the state has Native Hawaiians. You may not know that they're Native Hawaiians, but you have them. And also, all cultures who came to Hawaii, Hawaiian is the host culture. We were the first. We were the ones that welcomed everybody. We never really turned anybody away. We allowed people of foreign birth to become subjects of the Hawaiian king. They became citizens of the Kingdom of Hawaii. So, you know, it's Hawaiian culture is the host culture. Now, Bishop Larry Silva has come down and said that Hawaiian culture is the Hawaiian culture. And therefore, you know, all parishes have to reflect something of the Hawaiian culture. There was something I was thinking about, but I can't remember. That's what happens when you get old. Oh shoot, I can't remember what I was gonna say.
Oh, thank you, Father. I think we have one question in the comments, and it's from one of our students, Connor Flynn. And he asks, do you think environmental stewardship is part of the answer to racism in Hawaii?
Well, I think a lot of different things are an answer to racism in Hawaii. When you talk about environmental stewardship, you just have to look, where are all the dumps on this island located? Right in Nanakuli. Nowhere else on the island, just Nanakuli. That's pretty racist, I think. That's environmental racism. When they did that study, and I think I said this in my talk, when they did the study a few years ago about where they're going to place a new dump, because, you know, the Waimanalo Gulch dump is actually not a gulch. It's on the side of a mountain. So it's going up the mountain and they just fill it on the mountain. And so what I'm afraid of is if we get a big hurricane or something like that with like millions of inches of rain, that stuff will just go washing down. And where is it going to wash down to? Kolina, because that's right in the path, you know. but all the dumps are in Nanakuli area, and that's I think pretty racist. I also know that I don't know what to do about this, but when I was growing up in Kailua, there were a lot of local families living in Kailua. There were a lot of Caucasians living in Kailua, but there are a lot of local families. Now there's not that many. It's become too expensive. A lot of my classmates from Kailua High now live in Hilo or Puna on the Big Island because that's where they can afford to live, you know? So prices are excluding us because we don't have the $1 million jobs, you know? So I don't know. It's probably not answering your question, but.
I have another question for you. Give me 1 second, sorry. Why do you think racism is omitted from religion and church?
Could you repeat it? You were cut off a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Why do you think race and racism is omitted from religion and church? Should we be discussing this more in a spiritual and religious formation? And like, how would we be about bringing it up?
Definitely, we have to talk about this. That is all part of the 2 greatest commandments that God gave us. We have to love God with all our heart, with all our mind, with all our soul, and we have to love our neighbor as ourselves. As Christians, as Catholic Christians, we are called to love. We are not called to judge. Jesus specifically says that, not called to judge. So racism is a form of judgment. But when we're called to love, it doesn't matter who we love. We are called to love non-Christians. We are called to love Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, Shintoists. We are called to love atheists. I remember reading a book about Pope Francis. And one of his good friends was an atheist woman. And she was eventually murdered by the Chilean government. She was arrested, put on a plane, and thrown out the window of thrown out the back door of the plane to her death. But she was an atheist, but she was a good friend of Pope Francis. And I'm sure Pope Francis loved her as a human being. And so I think in this weekend's readings, when we heard about King Cyrus, how God raised up King Cyrus the Persian, who was not Jewish, to be the Messiah, to be the anointed one, the Christos, for the Hebrew people in the Babylonian exile. It shows us that God can work through anyone, not just Christians, not just Catholics, but God can work with whomever God pleases, because God is God. And all humanity in Genesis 1, we're all created in the image and likeness of God. The differences in race are superfluous because we're still all created in the image and likeness of God. Jesus says in scripture, if you say you love God, but you hate your neighbor, you are a liar. And so everyone is our neighbor. And therefore, if we love God, we have to love our neighbor. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Also, I had another question for you. So how can non-Native Hawaiians help and support Native Hawaiians, and like how can we support anti-racism in Hawaii and make sure that like we're able to help them and uplift them as non-natives?
I think the big way is education, educating yourself as to what happened to the Hawaiians, and according to who you are as a person, because not everybody can get up and walk through Waikiki in a protest, but maybe somebody can pray, you know, but there are different things that people can do. They have to just figure out what it is for themselves that they can do with the Hawaiian people. But to sit back and do nothing is not an option.
Thank you, Father Alapaki. I think that's a great starting point, is educating yourself about what has happened so we can look forward to see what we can do. I have a question here from Brother Dennis, and it comes with sort of a preface. He says, although Hawaiians are 20% of the population, 40% of the incarcerated are Native Hawaiian. On the mainland, the prison population is disproportionately people of color. His question is, what is the call of people of faith in Hawaii to address this?
Well, I definitely think we have to speak out. Another little factoid from Brother Dennis's 40% jail population is that of all the felonies committed in Hawaii, the #1 race arrested for these felonies are Caucasians. Hawaiians are 2. I think Hawaiians are larceny and car theft or something like that. But Hawaiians make up 40% of the population, and Caucasians make up about 20. You know, I think in addressing this and the discrepancies in the continental U.S., it is a question of race, but in the United States, it seems like if you have money, you can buy yourself out of jail. So you just hire yourself a good lawyer. But if you don't have money, then you're stuck with whoever the state provides for you, and you'll most likely lose. So that's why the death penalty is so bad. First of all, it's an affront to the sacredness of life. But second of all, they estimate 25% of all those killed in the death penalty are actually innocent. And now you're finding out, we're reading things or seeing things on the news of people in jail for like 40 years for murder or rape that they never did. And they're being released. The death penalty is so final. And if one person is innocent is killed, that's one too many. The death penalty has to end. We're lucky we don't have it any longer in Hawaii. I think it ended in 1959. So.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering how, could you give us some examples of how some ways us students can educate others on racism in Hawaii and get that out there? Because I know as us students, sometimes it's hard for us to find ways to get involved and to educate others. So could you give me a few examples of like ways us students can get involved with that?
Well, I think you can petition your university or your high school to offer classes on Hawaiian history, Hawaiian culture. I'm sure you do now, but make it more widely available. I think that's the best way. It's very hard to find out this information on your own, you know? So, but I think trying to get like there, St. Louis and Chaminade to start really pushing Hawaiian classes, Hawaiian culture, Hawaiian language, Hawaiian history among its students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Father Alapaki, could you talk more towards the Hawaiian culture and how does that relate to Catholic social teaching? What are some similarities, some differences that you've seen as being a priest at St. Rita's in Nanakuli, and also as your experience throughout the continental US? What's the sort of similarities between your culture and then your beliefs that you practice?
I think there's a lot. There are a lot of similarities between them and Native Hawaiians. I think enculturation in the church is very important. There are a lot of people who are against enculturation because they say, well, the Catholic Church is the Catholic Church. But what they don't understand is what we have in the Catholic Church today is not the same thing as Jesus did at the Last Supper. The whole Catholic Church is enculturated, mostly by Europe. You do have different Catholic churches. The Roman Catholic Church, or officially the Latin Rite Catholic Church, is just one of many Catholic churches. You have the Syro-Malabar churches in India. You have, and the Chaldean Catholics. You have the Maronites and the Melkites in Lebanon. You have all these different kinds of Byzantine Catholics. And even in Spain, there's small churches, but you have the Mozarabic Catholics, and there was another Catholic, I don't remember the name, that are not Roman Catholic. They're not Latin Rite Catholic. And they're all different culturally. And I think that when God created humanity, like I said, God created humanity in God's image. And I think when you have a whole group of people together, say like Native Hawaiians, we reflect an image of God that no one else reflects. Just like Chinese reflect an image of God that no one else reflects, or Koreans reflect an image of God, or Native Americans or African, they all reflect an image of God that needs to be enculturated in the liturgy. And the cultures best express who they are in their relationship with God in their own language. So I think this is why the church really needs to start looking into enculturation. I'll give you an example. In Japan, the priests would come and they would bow to the altar at the beginning of Mass, and Rome jumped down their throats and says, "You will kiss the altar." And the Japanese bishops wrote back to Rome and says, "But for us, kissing is a sexual act." So Rome wrote back and says, bowing is okay. You know, in Thailand has ancestor worship, and Rome allowed that to be enculturated into the church. So with Native Hawaiians, we also had ancestor worship. Our aumakua were ancestors. And so what I teach and tell my people at St. Rita is that aumakuas are not gods, but they are like our own saints. They were people who were wonderful people, and so much so for the family that they elevated them to this status. So they're like our saints, you know. And when what I wanted to also introduce into St. Rita, I haven't done this yet, is when we have the invocation of the saints at Easter Vigil. I want to start, everyone who died in that year, I want to put their names onto that. So as a part of enculturation, you know, for Hawaiian cultures. But we also do a lot of other things. First of all, in Hawaii, as in almost all the Pacific and Asia, when you come into someone's house, you take your shoes off. And so when people come to St. Rita, a lot of people take their shoes off, because when you take your shoes off, it's a sign of respect for the house you're entering. And the church is God's house. The other reasoning that we use is when Moses went up to the mountain and he saw the burning bush, God said to Moses, "Moses, remove your shoes, for this is holy ground." So we invite people, if they want to remove their shoes, they don't have to, but that's another form of enculturation. We also use the tea leaf. And at the end of Mass, everyone who's going to be visiting homebound people, we distribute the communion that they take home. We put it in a tea leaf. In Hawaiian culture, tea leaves were sacred. Hawaiians believed they kept evil spirits away from them. They noticed that if you put lei or food in it and you wrapped it up in a pu'olu, that it would last longer. Also, when you got sick, they would put it across your forehead to draw out the fever. So we just took all that into ours, because it's taking the precious body of Christ to those who are homebound, and they're usually sick, you know, and so that's why we use the tea leaf. So I'm trying to think of what else we do. There's a lot of things we do. Oh, we do a chant on Hawaiian Sundays. Our first Sunday of the month is the masses are always bilingual, Hawaiian and English. And we do the traditional types of like Hawaiian chants at the beginning of Mass. So.
I was gonna ask you another question. What advice would you give young adults to combat racism in our society today, especially those who might fear getting involved with controversial and sensitive topics such as this one?
I would just tell them, don't be afraid. But also when people get involved with other groups in terms of racism, don't come as the great white hope. You're coming to assist to see what you can do, but don't come in and tell them what to do. You know, if people come up to you and ask you, I think you should tell them. But I probably would not go out and just bring it up and tell people, well, you have to do this. You know, that just doesn't work. You know, if you see somebody acting in a racist manner, I would say something. When I first came back to Hawaii, I was in Hilo, and there was a meeting of kupuna, and they were Hawaiians, and they were talking, and they started to say racist things about African Americans. And I was so taken aback that I went up to, I know they're kupuna, and I was not, I was a younger priest then, but I said something. I said, you can't say that, you can't do that. That's a terrible thing to do, you know. And I says, they're probably more like us than other people because of the oppression that they've suffered. So sometimes you can't correct though. Sometimes it might be dangerous for you to correct. But if you can, I would correct that kind of behavior.
I agree. Also, so I feel like as students, especially younger, it's kind of harder for us to speak out to like our elders when they're like doing racist things because they're like, I guess that's how they were raised, even though it's wrong. I know like in my culture, I'm Mexican, so speaking out to your elders is like really hard. So do you have advice on
that too? Because I work with a lot of Hispanics when I was in the, yo hablo español, entonces, en Nueva York tenía que trabajar con los latinos y en otros lugares, entonces. So I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. We have another question from Andrew Anchetta. It says, generally, how has the Catholic Church response to racism changed? Has it improved throughout the years?
I think in terms of like enculturation, it's been more accepting. During the overthrow period in the 1890s, the Catholic Church definitely did not support the United States. They supported the king and queen. They supported the Kingdom of Hawaii. There were a few people that supported the United States, like Brother Dutton of Molokai. He fought in the Civil War, you know, so he was very pro-American. And once the overthrow happened, he flew the American flag from Kalaupapa. And then an American warship once sailed by Kalaupapa to honor him after the annexation. So, but generally the church, Catholic Church in Hawaii did not support the overthrow. They supported the Queen.
Father Alapaki, I have a question about language. So in the Hawaiian culture, we have a saying where our language, our words can bring life and they can also bring death. And I wanted to ask you, as people who are trying to talk about racism and bring awareness to these issues and the systemic problems, how can we speak those words of life and not use words that tear down or are death to people?
I think you just do it that way. You know, you try to be positive. Like when those kupuna were acting racist, I mean, I didn't yell at them. I didn't scream at them and tell them they're idiots or stupid. I told them, you know, that's really not nice. That they're people just like us, and we probably share more in common with them than we do with other people. You know, I didn't yell at them. You know, because once you yell at somebody, the curtains go up and they're not listening to you. So, but I know that saying, it's iko lelo keole, iko lelo kamake. And the Hawaiians really believe that if you say something bad, if you say something evil, you can't take it back. And it's going to go out and do its evil. So here I'm making all these hand signals. I talk with my hands. So, and so just, we have to be very careful at how we say things and how we address people.
We have another question. This is from Sarah. Is the Hawaiian Board of Land and Natural Resources receiving backlash from the Hawaiian people regarding the situation of Mauna Kea for allowing TMT to build on the sacred land?
Well, first of all, not all of the top of Mauna Kea is sacred. There are very sacred areas. There are also areas where they had villages up there because they mined basalt. And you can see them when you go up. It's got this really fine lava coverings, like in circles, where they would build their hales, and then the ground is soft, you can lie on it and it's comfortable. And when it snows up there, where those circles are, the snow is either not there or less deep. But those were where they had the little villages. But I think what's more important for us as Catholics is to realize that the University of Hawaii had promised that they would be good stewards of the Aina. The top of Mauna Kea is Hawaiian homelands. That whole top is Hawaiian homelands. That's the kind of lands they gave to Hawaiians to live. And so the Hawaiians do have a vested interest. Now, when they built the first telescope up there, they asked the Hawaiians for their input. But that was the last time. After that, they built 12 more without Hawaiian input. Second of all, when they built their telescopes, many of them never cleared out the waste from construction. They just left it up there for years and years and years until a lawsuit was filed. And then they finally had to take it down. The other part is there is no sewage up there. So if you have human waste, if you have anything like that, it doesn't go anywhere. And so they have to collect it. And for years and years and years, they just let it sit up there until, again, they were sued. And it took the helicopters 2 full days to remove all that waste. They've had hydraulic spills and mercury spills up there that have never been cleaned up. So they have not been good stewards of the land. And so what makes us think that the 30-meter telescope is going to be any different under the administration of the University of Hawaii? They've come out and they said, oh yes, well, we will do better. But there's nothing that we can do to have them prove that. They can just say that, you know? And so for that reason, I don't think they should build that 30-meter telescope up there. The other thing that really kind of irked me was they threatened. Remember early on, 30-meter telescope said, well, if we're going to be delayed anymore, we're going to move to the Canary Islands. Well, that was a big lie. They never had any intention of moving to the Canary Islands. They just did that because they wanted the state to fear losing millions of dollars and to go and remove the Hawaiian people or whoever was protesting up there. I give the state credit, they didn't do that. But TMT is still there. you know, they have no intention of moving to the Canary Islands. And they even asked the United States federal government now for $100+ million to help them in construction. So they haven't been truthful in many things.
Thank you, Father. I do want to be mindful of our time. So we're coming up to the last 10 minutes of our presentation. So if there are any last minute questions, please send them in through the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself, there is time. We do have one question from one of our faculty member here, and they have asked, based on your experiences in other major metropolitan cities around the US, such as DC, San Francisco, New York City, and Chicago, how are or were Hawaiians perceived, and in what ways are other cities addressing racism that you might feel work in Hawaii?
Okay, I once read an article in the New York Times, and they were talking about racism around the world. And they had used the buraku in Japan, Hawaiians in Hawaii, African Americans in the United States. They used different people. And in that article, after they did their research, they found that when those oppressed people are in their country on aptitude tests and things of that sort, they always score lower than the general population. But when they move away, like African Americans moving to Canada, they immediately go up to the normal. So when I was living in the continental United States, once people knew that I was Hawaiian, I was like a celebrity. They treated me differently, you know. They didn't treat me like they did in Hawaii. So I mean, there's racism up there, but not, it's up there, it's not so much against Hawaiians. I remember once when I was in New York City, I was behind a lady, and she was Hispanic, and there you can go to stores and pay your electric bill and gas bill. And so she was giving it was in an Irish section, and everybody in that area, in Inwood, in the northern part of Manhattan, most of the people were from Ireland. And so the lady was in the shop, and she's talking in Spanish, and he's telling her that she had to pay, I think it was $80, $30 for gas and $50 for electricity. And she was trying to pay just the $30, you know, and she was just talking in Spanish. And she was saying, she was choosing to pay the lower because she was trying to insinuate to him that she had a choice, that she pay one or the other. And so the man turned around and looked at me, and he says, without knowing who I was, he says, "You speak their lingo, you explain to her." So I did in Spanish, and she called me a traitor and paid her $80. So, I mean, there's racism. Once when I was in West Virginia too, when I first got there, I was walking across a bridge on campus, and one of the students came and spat on my face. And because at that time there was a lot of anti-Japanese feeling because of the car situation, Japanese cars. So he spit in my face, and he told me, he says, he called me a Jap, and he told me to go home, you know. So, I mean, but after 5 years, everybody in town knew who I was. So, but I mean, that didn't make it all right, but, you know, that was pretty good. So.
Well, thank you, Father Alapaki. We've sort of reached our time. So again, mahalo for sharing your mana'o and your wisdom with us. I think it's something that we can all appreciate. And like you said, those little steps of educating ourselves and then speaking those words of life into people and approaching it with a kind and soft heart and being compassionate is really important, especially for us here in Hawaii and wherever we come from in our homes. So with that, we're going to do some announcements. So if Rhea, if you have your presentation you'd like to pull up and show, so we could make mention of that.
Yes. And here to help me with my announcements is going to be Joseph. But sorry. So we have a couple of announcements. Our first announcement is the Chaminade Theater Group is doing a virtual in propaganda. The next showing is from the 22nd to the 24th, and you can find tickets that are for free on Show Tix for You. So I encourage you guys, if you guys have been to like a theater program, they're really good, and it's going to be a virtual stream. So check that out. Joseph.
So the Office of Student Activities and Leadership is still doing the October STEP Challenge. We are on week 3 this week, which is 15,000 steps. You can sign up to still participate to be entered in various e-gift card door prizes. The link is on the flyer as well as on our Instagram. Tomorrow, Campus Ministry and the Chaminade Student Programming Board will be having a commuter breakfast in Zubrano Lawn from 7:30 to 9:30 a.m. It is first come, first serve. They will be distributing out bentos and some breakfast pastries. So be on the lookout for that, and we'd love to see you out in that area.
Also tomorrow at 4 p.m. we have Share the Joy of Authentic Freedom, and we have Dr. Damien Costello. He's going to do a really awesome meeting. The Zoom room is on there, but it's going to be tomorrow at 4 p.m. on Zoom. Also, CUH Advising, in partnership with Humanities and Arts, is doing a pumpkin contest. So please vote. Voting started yesterday, but you can vote until the 26th. And here are some of the contestants that you can vote for. So definitely check out their Instagram. It's CUH Advising and CUH Humanities.
OSAL will be doing a video series that started yesterday on some college life hacks for academic success. So yesterday, Pam, one of our student coordinators, posted a video on organizational tips, both virtual and in-person organization tips. Today will be on physical space and your work environment, and then the rest of the series will follow through the 25th. Tomorrow, we have Chaminade's inaugural The Masked Singer program. For those of you who are not sure what this is, it is a show off of Fox, The Masked Singer, hosted by Nick Cannon, where celebrities participate, and you all will have an opportunity to guest performers of current Chaminade students that are participating. The Zoom link is on the bottom of this flyer. It is hosted by Sia, one of the student coordinators in our office, and it is from 6:30 to 8 p.m. tomorrow.
World of Dance is offering their workshops throughout October. So the next one is actually with one of our religious scholars, Anna Jane Fujioka. She's doing an R&B hip hop. It's going to be on Thursday, the 22nd at 4 to 5 p.m. on Zoom, and you can find the meeting ID. The World of Dance has been doing a bunch of dances throughout this October, so it's definitely one to check out. And you don't even need to turn on your camera. You can just dance along.
Eddie, who is one of our co-moderators for this workshop, will be having Foursquare in Henry Courtyard on Thursday and Friday of this week. If you don't know what Foursquare is, it's a fun, socially distant friendly game that we will be playing in Henry Hall Courtyard. Please register. The link is also on our Instagram and on this flyer, or just show up between 4 and 6 p.m. It'll be a lot of fun, and it's a good stress reliever.
On Friday, October 23rd, we have the St. Luke Blessing of the School of Nursing and Health Profession students, healthcare workers, and caregivers. This is actually going to be live streamed through our Facebook, the CUH Ministry, as well as the Mystical Rose Oratory at 11 a.m. So if any of you guys are in the nursing or in the health professions, this is definitely a great opportunity for you guys to come out, get a blessing, and join us in celebrating this special event. On the 28th, so next week, our Share the Joy on Wednesday is actually going to be the Joy of Citizenship in honor of the election and voting. We actually have Eva Andrade, who actually does a lot of the faithful citizen and intentional things on voting, on citizenship, and how to really discern during this election time. So it's definitely a great opportunity for all you students to come and check out, especially if you're struggling with figuring out how to vote and how to discern where to study. She does a great job in being very unbiased and helping to give out whatever information she can to help support you guys in being a citizen of America.
The last workshop for the Marianist Leadership Center for this semester will be November 4th at 3 p.m. And the topic is on finding common ground, basically about conflict resolution. And it will be facilitated by Susan Moyles, the Director of Human Resources, and Venus Iturralde, the Director of Residence Life. And the Zoom ID is also on the flyer.
And then on November 9th, we have Father Marty. He's doing the Marianist Spirituality for our fourth night at 6:30. So definitely come out and support him. The Zoom ID is also on the flyer. And also Pono always has drop-in sessions for internships. If you guys want to check it out, these are his hours. He is still accepting, so you can definitely check in with him if you're looking for an internship.
And the one a lot of you all have been waiting for, here's our Pacific Island Review Week flyer with all of our participating cultural clubs that will be participating next week. It starts on Tuesday and ends on Friday. All the information for how to participate both in person and virtually is on the flyer. I highly recommend that you participate next week and learn a little bit about our Pacific Island groups.
And then finally, this is OSAL. So this event today was hosted by OSAL as well as Campus Ministry, but please get connected to OSAL. This is their email, their website, Facebook, they have YouTube. So definitely follow them because then you get to find out all these really awesome events and information. So definitely, please, we all know you guys love social media, and this is kind of the avenues to find out all about us. Same with Campus Ministry. We also have a YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, we also have a Twitter. But if you ever want to get in contact and know about what's going on, these are the two offices that hosted tonight. But thank you guys for joining us, and that's all the announcements. Sorry, there was a lot.
Thank you, Rhea and Joseph. So we will close out our session with some final thoughts from Father Alapaki Kim, if there's any last words of wisdoms that he'd like to leave us with. And then I'd also like to invite Father Alapaki to lead us in our closing prayer.
I want to thank you for inviting me. It was very nice. I hope you found the session informative. If you would like me to come back, I'm more than happy to. So just let me know. My MOA or whoever can arrange it. Okay. So let us end. Ikai noa kama kua keiki ka uhane hemulele. E koma koma kua manalo mahaluni lo na me me te ia pawi haawi mai ai. Oia hoi no ke kula ki eki o St. Louis. Me ke kula nui o Chaminade. Hopo me te ia kako a pau. Mahalo nui loa no ke a hola a mako I hui pu kako. E hopo me te ia mako a pau. Ye ke no kia mau mea I kana Isu Christo ka hako I kai no kama kua ke keiki ka uhane hamulele. Amene, amene, amene. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Father Alapaki. Thank you to all of our religious scholars who attended. This is the end of our session. So sign off, and we hope that you're all staying safe and have a great rest of your day.
Aloha
Thank
kako.
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take it easy.